here's one of the things we wanted to do with the series was we're at a place in 2021 where the music is so big, it's so global, it's so like in your face, flashy, you know, jewelry, all this sort of superficial stuff, right? It's sort of upfront. But what we wanted to do was remind people where this all comes from and what it was initially about and still continues to be about, which is the connection to the music and the streets. Like ultimately, the streets are important because really the streets are just our communities. That's basically what we mean when we say the streets. We're talking about people that come from circumstances that are now, I guess they are, I was gonna say aren't typically American, but I guess they are kind of typically American. You know, we've always had poor folks that struggle, folks that, you know, aspire to live the American dream, basically. And the reason that we did this series is to try to shine the light on the importance of this relationship between these communities and between the community and this music, right? Beyond when you've made it, you know, for a lot of people, this music inspires them. It might inspire you to work out. It might inspire you to go have a good time at the club. It might inspire you to try to get your money up. Like whatever it is, it's coming from a community that all of these things are what we're striving for. And so to tell the story that we were trying to tell, we're telling it through the eyes of street legends. Like these people's struggle mirror the struggle in hip hop. You know, it's like people don't understand what a big deal it is to get some money. If you've always had some money and you've always had all of your needs met, then none of this stuff, sneakers ain't a big deal to you. You know what I'm saying? A little bit of jewelry is not a big deal to you. You know, going to this restaurant's not a big deal, but like, if you never had shit and all you want to do is be somebody, you know what I mean? This music speaks to that, you know? And so the importance of everybody from, like when we talk, you mentioned record labels, right? Everybody from Ruthless Records to Def Jam, Rush Management, Rap-A-Lot Records, you know, Death Row, Cash Money, Rock Nation, Bad Boy. I mean, the list goes on, right? The commonality between all those labels is that they're connected to the communities where they come from. And they're speaking for those communities. They're speaking about what's going on in those communities. And that's an important thing. And that's the thing that people forget about, you know? It's like they forget about the struggle that this music came from and how amazing it is that it's reached this far.
It's interesting to me because, yeah, basically like what the series does is, you know, pull the veneer back, pull the curtain back a little bit. You're not gonna, you know, everybody's gonna protect, you know, some of their stuff. But I will say this is what's interesting to me is just the show is kind of a bigger analogy for me. For example, everything, when you really look at a lot of stuff, especially in hip hop culture, but even in rock and roll, in a lot of stuff in fashion, it comes from the streets. You know, in the 90s, fashion designers would go hang out, you know, in Manhattan and take photos of kids, you know, with their clothes. It still goes on. And then you see it on the runways, you know what I mean? It's the same thing, you know? And so like, it's an interesting story. Like, this is my analogy with the show. When we were scouting locations, we had to, we were looking, Rashidi wanted some rooftops. And so I had to go to a lot of rooftops in LA. Long story short, the building that I was scouting for one of the rooftops for Hip Hop Uncovered was the building that the Doors had taken the inside sleeve cover for Hotel Morrison, their famous album. Later on, I find out that that same location was where they shot the opening of Beat It, the bar interior in Beat It, right? But I say all this to say that that bar was a dive bar called the Hard Rock Cafe. And that dive bar inspired the people in London. The guys saw the Doors album cover and they called up Jim Morrison. They said, hey, can we use that name, Hard Rock Cafe? And look at what that launched, $1 billion industry. So again, You coming from the streets and it launches this global thing. This is the same thing in this. It's kind of interesting to me how you can find the genesis of something great in the streets and you can't reproduce it. It's so organic. And that's what I think we captured with the show.
My biggest hope is that any young person watching this can find inspiration in the stories of Big U, Haitian Jack, Trick, Deb Antony, and Bimmy. Because once you see the whole series, you're gonna realize the eras that they lived through, right? They lived through the crack era. They lived through the prison industrial complex and got caught up in that, right? Yet they still survived. So hip hop is definitely a music and a culture of survival. And these people 1000% represent what a survivor looks like, you know? Everybody don't have to die at 19, at 21. You know, some of us, including myself, I grew up having that fear that I might not be here. I might not make it to 25, you know? And that can cause a lot of reckless behavior. And what if you do live past that though? You know what I'm saying? Like, then what? You know, most of these people are around 50 or above, man. And that's the beauty of this story. Like, hip hop is growing up and we're trying to show you an example of what the adult version of hip hop looks like in this era and in this moment. And it's not always just the music. You got to remember, every single rapper that you love had somebody behind them like Big U or Trick or any of our contributors in the show.